my man. I am excited for this conversation. Thank you for joining me.
Good to be here.
So we were just chatting, and your advice is spot on. You should always just hit record because I couldn't even help myself. As soon as we get on, I am immediately excited to start riffing about the broader topic, what you're building, things like that. So I think this is going to be a very fun conversation.
I was actually looking at this, not to completely sidetrack the conversation before it even begins.
Love it. No, spin us.
But I was looking, how long have we known each other? That was the thing I was trying to figure out today. I was like, I don't know. I've known Kyle since we were in college. Anyways, we did a couple of like little project internship things together.
Yep.
But look at us now, huh? We're potting.
Look at us now. Who would have thought?
Who
Not
would've
me.
thought?
Not me. Yeah, man. I think it's 2013. I think it's been 12 plus years.
Wow.
Long time. I've known you longer than I've known my wife, and she gave me 4 kids. What have you given me? Where's my Evan offspring?
Listen, I thought we both would be richer by now. I really thought I thought our backgrounds would be better at this point.
Dude, absolutely. I'm telling you what, man. We should have just put everything we've done over the last 12 years, should have just gone right into Bitcoin. That's all we needed to do.
Well, that's brutal.
That's the mistake.
No, I don't want riches that way. Nvidia stock, public markets.
There you go, dude. I like it. Oh, dude. Well, this will be good. Let's start first. So I want folks to have context. So this is going out on Saturday. You announced the launch of the Leverage on, I think, Tuesday. Tomorrow you'll be publishing your first edition of the Leverage. Give us the TLDR. Give me your background. Like, I want folks to understand how awesome your rise has been with Napkin Math and Part of Every, and then what was the impetus of the Leverage?
Yeah, so I didn't mean to be a writer. Actually, speaking of college, I took one writing class and I got a B- in it.
That's all it takes.
I never meant to. So I just operated in Silicon Valley for a number of years and did VC stuff, did startup stuff. Some worked, some didn't. And then right before COVID hit, I started a job at Substack where I dogfooded the product, and I wrote this post about dating app design ethics, and it went viral. It was like, oh, that's fun. I should do it again.
The dopamine, straight right to it. Feels so good.
Yes. And I was like, oh, this is easy. Very wrong. I thought it was easy back then. And so I built a little publication about technology and social problems. Then Dan and Nathan, who are the co-founders of Every, bought that publication and brought me into the fold. And I worked there part-time for about a year and full-time for about 3 years. And so I just left. Like, my official last day was a week or two ago. And we took it to over 100,000 subscribers. We built all these software businesses. We built this consulting business, which is just ripping. And it was a really, really great job. Like, a great job. And I have nothing but love and respect for the people there and for my former team. But the Leverage was just something I wanted. Like, the best products just come from this deep desire. I just wanted this thing to exist. And I kept waiting for someone to make it. And no one did. And I just, like Thanos, I was like, fine, I'll do it myself. That was what I had to do to make. I just had it, like, I was like, all right, I'm meant to sling emails. This is my calling in life. So the Leverage is, I try to make it entertaining, beautiful, and rigorous, which is very hard to do all three at the same time. But it's basically tech market coverage in the way that I want it, where it tells people what happened, but more importantly, why it happened. There's a lot of places you can go to say, oh, these 5 headlines happened this week, but very few will tell you the actual implications of that. They'll just report out the facts. And I wanted something a little bit more in-depth, a little bit more personal, tasteful, curated. And so every week on Sunday, I'll bring together the news items that I thought were important. And then once or twice a week, I'll do a deep dive of a long form essay and questions I'm interested in. So next week, it's going to be, why can't we name a single AI model correctly? Like, why do we have like Gemini 2.14 Pro new, And then the second one is, what does AI translation software do? That was a really long-winded way to answer your question, but I'm excited about it. So that just kicks off on Sunday. The first edition goes out tomorrow.
Amazing. I want as much wind from you as possible, so there's no such thing as too long-winded. The thing that I think is most compelling, so you and I, when you were sort of ideating on this, we're texting back and forth about why to do this. One of the triggers was the launch of deep research. And I'm sure that you've been thinking about this for a long time, but it's definitely, I think for both of us, it was a real wake-up call of like, okay, like we need to separate out, like we both write, what is it that we do that is special and what has clearly become commoditized. I'm curious to get your first kind of raw perspective on seeing deep research and what that made you feel about yourself. And then like, once you got over the like self-loathing of like, apparently a robot can do my job, how do you then come back to like, okay, but there are aspects that are critical that are much harder to automate?
Yeah, I think when we were texting, when deep research first came out, I was like, I think I need to quit my job. I think that was like, I didn't give you any preamble. I didn't tell you the context. I think I just texted you that. It was the depth of the answer. Now, when I use deep research for subjects that I'm an expert in, I'll typically find, I would say like 10 to 15% of just slightly off, like nuance that it's not capturing. But that 10 to 15% is going to shrink over time. And for most people, that nuance is not necessary. So as a professional writer, that's my full-time gig, I have to really ask myself, what is the specific value proposition that I bring and how can I double down on that? Which is, I can go a lot more into depth into how I thought through all that logic. But that was the first thing I thought. I was like, oh man, everything has changed. My old job of just like compiling facts and presenting them interesting is no longer differentiated enough to be a full-time career.
Yeah, let's dig into it, because I feel like one of the things that I think about all the time is the sort of like evolution from like really bare bones like monolithic media of like, you know exactly what you're getting. You almost feel like you're sort of like one of the cows with the giant thing that's getting like force fed a very specific diet and meal, and so it's like, you know what you're getting from the kind of mainstream media because they've been beat over years into this very specific style and approach. And then the thing about like just blogging over the early, 2000s or whatever, was that it was people carving off a really specific thing. Usually it was about a very specific voice, like they just sounded different. And then over time, expertise started to play a role in that. That's my perspective. Like I feel like it was early blogging it was primarily just about voice. Like you were following somebody because you liked them and they seemed interesting, they made some good points and whatever. And then over time it became, I follow this person not just because they're cool, but because they have expertise or perspective on this specific thing or whatever. And in my opinion, podcasting kind of like mirrored that later, as like that the distribution mechanism became more capable. YouTubing, same thing. Like early on, that's the reason why today we're still early in the days of like, for the most part, YouTube is like just vibes. Like people watch Mr. Beast not because he has a deep expertise. They watch it because it's entertaining and it's a vibe. Over time, I think we are going to see more things like YouTube channels and stuff like that, and you certainly have them, but where it becomes more a function of like I hire this to do a certain job, not just because I like their vibes. So I think media has gone through the same evolution in multiple formats. And so for you specifically, let's dig into that. Like, why now at this point in time where aggregating information and presenting it in a compelling way is not enough to set you apart from a world that has access to tools like deep research or O3, which is like my new freaking secret love affair. Like there's got to be something more to it that you can bring to the table.
I think of my job in three broad buckets. The first is personality really matters. Like building a parasocial relationship with my readers. I try very hard to make my prose be reflective of who I am as a person, and I try to let my monetization model fit that as well. I want people to care deeply about me because the leverage is me. And I want people to care a lot about the values that I bring to the publication I'm trying to put into the world. I had one of my readers, when I did the launch, they did this great quote tweet and I loved it. And he said, "Evan is a character with character." And I was like, yes, that's exactly what I want to have happen. Yeah. And so I think that's actually a real value proposition, because when it's just off the assembly line, it's much more difficult to trust what the text says. And it's the same thing with these models. I think I'm more competitive because I am a human being. The second is deep research all that different than going to Google Scholar was like 3 years ago? I don't think so. Like, it's a little easier, there's less friction, but the hard part is just knowing what questions to ask and actually reading the text. The hard part is the curation. Wikipedia has been there for 20 years. There's nothing stopping people from learning. And the hard part is less knowing deep research existence and knowing what to give to deep research, knowing what to ask, what is important. And that's why the leverage, I think a lot about highlighting the stories that actually matter, even if they're the ones that won't drive the most clicks, because I want people to feel that there's deeper implications to everything they're reading.
I 100% agree with that. And I would say I think that's the reason why, like, I thought deep research was awesome, but the sort of volume of output and the inability to kind of guide it was very, very frustrating, to the point where like I couldn't use it for what I wanted to use it, even though I could like glimpse the vision of it. And I feel like that's why O3 is like so powerful for me, because as I'm writing it, we've got a massive deep dive that we're doing right now for country research, and it's like if I were to say, hey, here's the topic, here's the outline, write it for me into deep research, the output would not be what I want it to be, and it would be it's borderline useless because it's so much that I have to go through and like figure pieces out. But for me to be going through and it's like, okay, I've crafted this like very logical flow of ideas, and then what I'm trying to say is like, hey, I'm trying to think of examples of companies that have been very successful as subsidiaries of other companies where they could potentially be competitive to the customers of the parent company. Like they've built a competitor as a subsidiary, but they've been successful. What's a good example of that? And it's like, and it gives me the examples, and it's like, oh, this is a great example, and it fits right into my narrative. So to your point, I think knowing where to ask it to chime in is like the most valuable part. So sorry to interrupt, but I think that's exactly right.
I think you're totally right. Going back, like when you're using deep research, when you get this big result, or even O3, I'm going to guess that you are skimming it. Like I'm going to guess you're just kind of rapidly looking. What I want to make is, this is what I have an editorial team that I work with, a couple of freelance editors I keep on staff. The thing I tell them is I want every sentence a delight, every insight a wonder, where like there shouldn't be a wasted comma, where every single thing is deliberate. The prose, it sucks you in. And that's so hard. It's super, super hard to do. It's very hard to do. It puts you in the top 1% of writers on the planet to do that.
Yeah, especially once a week.
I do it twice a week. 2 to 3 times a week. Yeah.
Yeah, to do it at all.
Yeah, it's very, very hard. And your original question is like, why now in the context of deep research? It took me writing full time for 3 years to really build the skills and feel confident that I could do it on my own. And to their credit, incubated me through that period and gave me all these resources to flourish and feedback. But yeah, it's just a very hard skill that very few people on the planet have. And I wasn't willing to bet my family's like financial future on it until I knew. And I figured it out in January or February this year. I was like, oh, I can do this. Like I can do this. And then deep research came out and I was like, okay, that's the sign. I gotta go.
Yep. A sign from the gods. So let's go back to the mainstream media question, because obviously like this is not new territory. People have been talking about the sort of decline of institutional trust for years, and people care less and less about like the monolithic sources of information. The sort of fake news and misinformation campaigns have bothered people, and to the point where like I think like, you know, in 2016 or whatever, when Donald Trump kind of popularized the idea of fake news, everybody was like, news isn't fake. Like a lot of people I think and then it was like probably a decent chunk of news is maybe actually fake, and we were like, oh, okay, crap, like this is actually harder to parse than we thought it was. And one thing that I thought was so interesting was we did a deep dive a couple years ago where I kind of stumbled onto the concept of malinformation, like malware and misinformation, but like malinformation being like information that is true but is not preferred or ideal, right? Like the sort of wrong truth. And I was like, this is some 1984 shiz if I've ever seen it, right? Like, and so you start to like feel like, okay, the relationship with information has become really warped and bastardized. Like that's true. Like the information regime was broken, right? But why then do we as readers and audiences turn to these sort of individual voices? Like in your mind, what has driven the preference for a Joe Rogan over a New York Times or an Evan over a TechCrunch or whatever?
Well, we'll see if they prefer Evan over TechCrunch. We got some time. I think I take a little bit of a different perspective than you. I think people are pretty hard on mainstream media without actually understanding the work that it takes to produce great work. Almost universally, the outcomes that you see that you may disagree with or you may characterize as malinformation are an issue of audience preferences and incentives. So to give the example of TechCrunch, one common complaint I hear a lot from the venture capitalists I talk with and the founders are like, oh, TechCrunch is so mean. Or like they need to cover my startup founding, right? Like I raised X amount of money from Founders Fund and I give fist bumps to Peter Thiel. Why can't I get a TechCrunch article? Stuff like that. And the reality is no one cares about a startup's funding round except for the startup and the startup founder's mom. No one cares. And so like you might get a couple thousand views on a founding round, which isn't even worth the journalist's time in the context of a TechCrunch, which is publishing, 30 to 60 articles a day. They got a whole staffing regiment. The CPMs that you get, it doesn't make any sense from a monetization perspective. And the only things that really drive views, sex, theft, violence, Apple changing a policy so everyone's losing money and we have to learn about this new Apple policy. That's it. Like there's a reason they mostly talk about big tech is because it's big enough that the CPMs can be justified for investing in a quality journalist to do the research. So that's really, really hard. And I don't like when we're like, oh, there's mainstream media and I'm going to outcompete them. I was like, I can't, as an individual commentator, I cannot exist without them. My entire information network relies on places like The Information, TechCrunch, the New York Times, because they have great journalists doing doing really wonderful things, but I view my product as a pretty fundamentally different, where my job is to read through all of that, understand the incentives of the journalists, understand the incentives and the business model of the company they're covering, and just go in more depth than your average person who's 4 years out of college and pumping out 3,000 words a day or whatever can do. So I think a lot of times when we're hard on mainstream media, what we're actually frustrated with is reader preferences, because readers just don't care, and they don't care about misinformation all that much. They only care when it disagrees with their priors. And I will tell you that my most nuanced arguments receive the least amount of views without fail. And the more that I'm willing to be bombastic, the more views and money I make. And that's purely reader preference. That's nothing I can do about that.
Yeah. One, like, because I agree and I understand the framework that you're having, because 100%, like, the stuff that I do in my Substack or the things that we do for Contra Research, like, I constantly have to turn to the sources. And going back to, like, your question about, like, how you use the three, like, I think, like, I frequently use it as just a much better form of Google, where I'm like, okay, but I'm like, never once am I taking a statement out of ChatGPT's output and saying that's probably true and moving on. Like, it's like, okay, but give me the source for that. I go find that in the core source. And it's like, oh, okay, yeah, this is like a corporate, press release or whatever, an article that I trust or whatever. So for sure, like, that sort of underlying source material is important. The only pushback that I'd give is, like, you're not competing with TechCrunch necessarily in that the, like, product is different. But I think one of the biggest obstacles that comes with the sort of media drenched world that we all live in is that attention is finite. Like, there's a certain subset of amount of information that if I'm reading your pieces every week, that is at least a fraction of time that I'm not spending scrolling on Twitter or reading the information or reading TechCrunch or whatever. I'd rather just read you, so I don't read TechCrunch. And in that way, TechCrunch's business model is suffering because you benefited from their work. And so how do you think about the, like, attention competition that you're presenting?
What is the Reed Hastings quote? Our biggest competition is Fortnite and sleep.
100%. Yeah, exactly. That's a great quote.
I feel the same way, where there is a certain category of people who are addicted to the news, and which I am happily one of. One of my first performance reviews, I got in trouble because I was reading too much of the news at work.
Yeah.
So I'm a news junkie. Yes, I compete for them with attention, but I don't compete for them for insights. I view my role as telling people what matters. TechCrunch does not do that. And so I think it's important to delineate those two, because they're fundamentally different. But you're absolutely right. Like, I want to read stuff about tech. Like, yeah, like, I'm competing with TechCrunch and The Atlantic, and I'm competing with Contrary Research too, right? Like, if I wrote a profile of a company and you guys already have a deep dive, like, it's a battle royale.
Yeah, totally. I want to, like, take a step back. So as you think about positioning the leverage in this sort of broader world, one of the things that I have thought about and have never sat down to do, but I feel like there is I don't even know if it's a competitive matrix, because to your point, like, you hire different types of media for different things. And maybe I go back to, like, a good example being, like, the streaming wars. Like, I feel like now everything has become so commoditized that, like, the same types of TV that might have been on HBO are probably on Apple TV and are probably on Netflix and whatever. And so increasingly what maybe I used to turn to a specific source for now is, like, highly, highly commoditized. And so I don't know if it's competitive matrix, because we're the sort of, let's isolate it to, like, tech media writ large. There are still different reasons, right? Like, I watch TBPN for a different reason than I will go watch, like, Matt Turk's podcast at First Mark or whatever, like, or the official A16Z podcast or whatever. Like, I use those for different things. For the same reason I would read Ben Thompson for a different reason than I would read you, than a different reason I would read, an every newsletter or whatever. Like, there's different purposes. But what do you feel like is the matrix of, like, if you were to lay out all of tech media, what is the matrix? Is it timeliness versus evergreen? Is it vibes versus facts? Like, how do you think about the segmentation?
I don't necessarily think about it in 2x2. I think about it in the business model. To run you through some quick math, for a subscription product like mine, where I'm priced competitively with the Times, with Ben Thompson, so the leverage is $15 a month or $145 for the year. At those, with the average churn rate that you'll see in a consumer subscription product, my average LTV might be $180 to $200. And in the entire world, there might be about 5 million people who really care about tech media, who care about tech enough to pay these high prices. Like, it costs as much as the Times, right? So I'm not, like, a cheap product by any means. So when you look at this landscape, the incentives are very, very hard to be a nuanced actor because the best monetization models are either massive scale that is ad subsidized. So that's the tech crunch. In the middle is probably a double the price of what I am, which is like the Information, which is a trade publication where you're doing original sourcing, original reporting. And then at the far end is A16Z, I apologize, contrary as well, where you are trying to get founders to like your vibe, to be impressed with what you're doing, and your monetization is you purchase equity.
Arguably even more expensive than the Times.
So I think that's how I think about it, is each of those business models incentivizes a different type of writing, a different type of insight. So to run through from the very bottom, the tech crunches of the world are incentivized to big tech scandal, right? The middle of the market, original sourcing and reporting, still big tech, still scandal, just original, and they can do stuff like org charts and databases. And the tech media and the venture capital case is rah, woohoo, like tech's the best, everything's wonderful, please let us buy your equity. And there's a narrow way through, quote the Lisan Al-Gaib, but there's a narrow way through for someone to build a deeply nuanced product that is analytical, it is rigorous, it covers the things that matter if you can keep your cost structure very, very low, which is what I'm trying to build with the leverage. Like no one's full time on it besides me. I keep my costs incredibly low. And the hope is that by being upfront with my incentives and transparent with my flaws and where I get things right, I'll be able to build a product that's competitive with each of those three buckets because it's trustworthy, it's analytical, and it's personality driven. And you don't have to worry about things not being thorough.
To like double click into the business model conversation, because I feel like you're going to know more about this than most folks, having spent so much time at Every, where like you guys really had to drill in to understand the different sort of levers that exist in this business, right? Probably even more so, at least at this point, than the leverage, because the leverage has one specific set of levers to pull.
Yeah.
Versus Every had many, right? To your point, like the consulting, and you sold products and different things. So when you think about the business model, and I've actually never looked into this, is the core driver for the comparable resources, I would say like voice and personality driven tech commentary, if that's like a good category. And I got put into that like the, probably Ben Thompson down through Packy and Mario Gabriel and, different folks like that, where it's like, it's a very clear voice. You're subscribing because of them, maybe you're paying for whatever, but is the core driver, is it word of mouth? Have a lot of those guys had success with ads? Is it like, what's the primary distribution mechanism of successful people and personality driven newsletters? Like,
it depends on the year. So right now it's short form video chopped up from podcasts, which is why lots of people are doing short form video and chopped up podcasts. 2 years ago, it was social media, threads, the COVID era boom. Now it's format driven, and like there is no great growth mechanism. It's one of the great issues within the space. It's very, very challenging to grow.
Yeah, there's no distribution playbook anymore.
None. Basically, you have to have incredible content, get really lucky, and keep your costs low enough until you hit an inflection curve. So for Every, we were just kind of like trundling along, and then we were early to AI, and we called it, and we bet early, and we benefited from it in a really big way. And Packy, to his credit, bet early on crypto, and that became a whole thing that grew a base. And once you climb up that S curve, it's an S curve, right? So it does peter off, and then you just slowly churn a little bit until you find that next S curve, and you arb it as much as you can, and then it dies. And there's no sustainable competitive advantage. There's no distribution advantage. There's no technological innovation. There's no defensible asset outside of an email list. It is a horrible business model that I would never advise anyone to take up. It is not good. But if you can climb that S curve, because the costs are so low, you can have this great lifestyle. It's very intellectually rigorous and enjoyable. And you want to go be a venture capitalist, there's a path to raise money, and there's all that stuff if you want it. But climbing that S curve is a grind, particularly if you're trying to do it in a way with character and honor.
Well, and that's a good sort of adjacency too, where you look at like, okay, the other element to this that people then try and distinguish themselves through is like adjacent products, right? So like you guys at the consulting business, but also like several products that have gotten launched at, right? Like things like Lex and stuff like that. You've got, obviously Packy has his fund. So there are definitely like, I can't remember who did the piece, but there was a piece a couple weeks ago about the next great venture fund will start out looking like a media company or whatever. It's like venture equity investments can be a way to monetize fees on that, whatever. But then there's also things like Slow Ventures launched a creator fund where their goal is to be able to invest in creators who have built distribution and then leverage that distribution for products. And I think the example they gave, I can't remember what the guy's name is, but it's somebody who built like 1 million+ subscriber like YouTube channel about car reviews, and then he built like a car trade-in marketplace, and he uses that influence and distribution to distribute his own product, right? And so like there are adjacencies to be able to build. In your mind, do you think that it's like that will be a bifurcation of like almost similar like in the venture world, you've seen this bifurcation of like firms that are going to try and do everything for everyone at every stage, and then the firms that are going to be trying specialists. There could be a similar, you could argue for a similar bifurcation in sort of content creators, where like either you could stick to what at least is your current model, which is like the almost artisanal, like I'm going to try and have taste as a core characteristic of what I do and try and get up those S curves as I can to be able to just wait it out, have a low cost structure, whatever. Or you become the other version of that, which is trying to do a bunch of, maybe it's the Mr. Beasts of the world, right? We're trying to have products and services and all these different things. Like, do you think that's the path that you sort of choose when you go down the content creation path, is one of those two forks?
Well, I think people underestimate. I sound like an asshole when I say this, for which I apologize. I think people underestimate how hard this is and how few people there are on the planet that can actually do this, where they can be creative enough to publish frequently, they can be disciplined enough, they have the business acumen. We're talking about people as rare as great founders, in my opinion, especially in the world of business content, which is my specialty. I wouldn't deem to talk about hobby content, which is totally different. But in industry publications, I could go double my salary right now at any point, triple it, if I just quit and went back to working at some, I could go invest, go work at a fund, or I could go work at a SaaS company and go make great money and work half as much. And so you have to be a real sicko. Like you gotta really, really like this, and you must not like money. And you know what? There's not that many people who are willing to do so. So I think this was the issue we actually had at Every, was we could never find people who were able to consistently produce and were interested in consistently producing.
Yeah.
So I think it's a talent problem more than anything else. And as far as the business model goes, in trade publications, I think of it as power law content, where I have readers who control hundreds of millions of dollars of budget, right? But to me, I monetize them for $15 a month. And so how you take advantage of that is kind of up to the individual person. I think honestly, a venture fund is one of the smartest ways you can do that. Whoever published that post that you read, they ripped me off because 3 years ago, I called them content capitalists when I published a post on this back in the day.
Too early to the S curve.
I know, it's timing, it's a timing thing. So I really do think it comes down to business model, monetization, and talent. Like, there's nothing secret mysticism or dark forces at work in media. It's just not a very good business, and most people who are smart go elsewhere.
So interesting. One of the things, so then if you isolate down into like the world of tech content, one of the things that I think has exacerbated the complexity, because I was thinking about that, and to go back to like how long you and I have been doing this, like 10 years ago when I got started, it was really like, in the venture world, it was like Fortune had term sheet and Dan Primack wrote that. And so you read that every day. And when he left and started Axios and they did pro rata, it's like, okay, now I guess I read two of these that look very similar. And then it was like TechCrunch and it was like Hacker News. There wasn't a ton outside of that, right? It's like there was some people who read Ben Thompson, but like he really liked semiconductors, and back then that was not super cool. And so not all of us read all those pieces. Like there was subsets here and there of different things that people read, but like the universality of tech was like very limited aperture. And I thought of this tagline where it's like, okay, if sort of software or like technology broadly, like if technology ate the world, then everything is technology. And if you're trying to produce media that covers technology, increasingly you have to cover the whole world. Like I feel like it used to be possible to be really isolated in tech, where it was like we kind of we're hackers and we think about this specific subset of things and build these things, and it's like politics don't matter, like geopolitics more broadly, like how thinking about China or thinking about supply chains or thinking about, commodity costs or whatever, like none of that mattered at all. And now I think it's not just that like, yeah, we're also all politics junkies and whatever, but it's like, no, like those things actually, we are impacting those things. Like we have investments in those things. There are technology companies that are building in those worlds. And so now we suddenly have to care about everything. Do you think that is true? Or do you think that I am just one of these chronically addicted to information types of people like you?
I think you're absolutely right. On the first point of why we have to care about everything, these companies are so large. I think it's easy to forget what a $3 trillion company means, and they're all based in the Bay Area, pretty much. That really, having multiple companies all compounded, they just spread throughout the entire economy. Amazon does AWS and the James Bond movies is so weird, It's like, how does that happen? FTC, what's going on? Free James Bond, bring Daniel Craig back. But so I think you're right. Like, tech covers everything, and the tech that covers everything has been pretty much monopolized by the Magnificent Seven in many ways. There's lots of startups that are doing lots of interesting things all over the market. You're right that it covers everything. I don't think it matters only to news junkies. It is interesting. I can tell you this from the click-through data. Whenever I write about regulation, I will see a quarter of the engagement of what I will do if I just talk about, like, Elon Musk had his 30th
Another
kid
baby.
or whatever. People do not like about regulation. It's one of the great, I'm working on my draft for Sunday, and I'm talking about, I don't know if I'll publish it because I'm trying to make it entertaining, but I'm talking about the Euro. The EU just fined Meta, I think it was like 300 million euros, and Apple 500 million. And, like, I know readers will not care, but I'm trying to make them care because it actually is the most important thing that probably happened last week, or one of them. Is just regular people don't pay attention for whatever reason. To give you a sense for, like, how do I make them care about, so you know how I said 500 million euros? That's because I can't do it in dollar denominations because the currency fluctuations are too extreme right now.
It's a rough time to be a currency specialist.
Right. This is so much more important than, like, some little company raising a $10 million round. Getting my readers to care, it's like one of the great challenges is that I'm personally excited about with Leverage is I want to write about topics that may not seem important, but by the end, if I say it, you're going to care. That's kind of like the mark. And so I'm doing that. Like, I even talk about Sinners. If you're a cinema person, which I am, film is the great American art. So I'm talking about Sinners and how they did different projection formats. And I think most of my readers aren't going to care, but they're going to care by the time their paid annual subscription runs out. I'm going to make them care about these things. I know that's ambitious and dumb, but, like,
yeah,
it's
a tall order.
That's what I'm going to do. It's a tall order, but what's the point? Otherwise, I'm just going to go work at Salesforce and make way more money and hate myself. So I might as well just swing big.
Well, I'm sure there's a good, I stole the phrase panic writing from Matt Levine. I'm sure he has another good line about making people care about stuff that they wouldn't normally care about, because I feel like he does a very good job of, like, finding a way to get people to care about the most esoteric things. So absolutely it is, like, to your point, I think it's like there's very few people who can do it well, but if you can, like, there is a significant value in that. I also think that, like, to your point about the sort of, like, attractiveness of, like, drama and, like, almost, I don't know, soap opera-esque, like, vibes. Like, people care so much about that. Like reality TV or whatever. Like, yeah, I think that we owe a responsibility to the people who have dedicated their lives to, like, building important things, because, this is make me maybe sound like a dick, but, like, there are a lot of people who, like, if they're distracted from their jobs, it doesn't matter that much. Like, if they're deeply unmotivated and whatever, and they love to drown their weekends in, reality TV and stuff, like, hey, like, that's each their own. But in the world of, like, we are trying to build things that really matter and, like, shift the universe in a very specific direction and stuff like that. Like, trying to get those people to care about important things as opposed to the thing that is very nonsensical actually has, like, really notable trickle effects. And so I think it's important for you, because, like, it would be really easy to put on my very stupid VC hat that I wear all the time and say, oh, well, like, trying to force people to care about something sounds like you're selling a vitamin instead of a pain pill or whatever, blah, blah, blah. Like, that may not be something that they want. But it's like, doesn't matter. Like, we have a responsibility to try and sell that vitamin or whatever, like, try and create a healthier ecosystem of people who are more well-informed. So it feels like you have that, like, it's almost like a moral responsibility that is, like, not a joke. Like, it's not just because you like it, but it's because it's important.
No, yeah, I genuinely feel that way. I feel that we have done, particularly since technology is so powerful in so many sectors that we talked about, we have done a great disservice to ourselves by not caring about the important things, by not caring about the subtle things. And I try my best not to moralize in the newsletter. I fail spectacularly every week. Can I give you an example that bugged me? Like,
Please.
Really bugged me today. I was reading about, I want to say it was Nintendo, and it had this layoff in the 80s, where the big layoff company was going through a complete disaster. The CEO took his pay to zero, ate in the cafeteria, and didn't do anything until he brought the company back, brought people their jobs back. And I think about that, and I contrast it to the golden parachutes that founders take, or how founders will sell secondary at the Series A or even the seed round and not give their teams the own opportunity. And like, they took the risk. Oh, and like there's this financial motivation. And maybe I shouldn't talk about selling secondaries and how it's not moral on a VC's podcast. People with great power have a borderline divine responsibility to do better with it. And I want people to care more about the world around them. I want them to think through the implications of what does it mean when we're increasing engagement rates in social media. I want people to care about this stuff. And so that's why I do what I do, is I want people to understand the undercurrents of what's happening.
I think that I fall squarely in the middle, because I think that there are a lot of, and this is one of the reasons why like quote unquote like mainstream tech coverage has fallen out of favor, is because we went through a period of reckoning where people were appreciating how damaging a lot of technology, like a lot, not even damaging like universally, but like how potentially damaging certain subsets of technology can be, or whatever, like addiction and stuff like that. And so you look at like, you know, Facebook and Twitter and Apple, and whether it's like everything from like, you know, whatever, like human rights, labor violations to deliberately addictive consumer technology and stuff like that. Like there's a bunch of implications that we kind of had a reckoning, and tech kind of turned into like, hey, we should be default skeptical of technology because there's been we were so excited about the implications that we didn't appreciate them until it was too late. And then now we kind of have to be skeptical of tech. Like that's one end of the spectrum. There's the other end of the spectrum that is like universally optimistic about technology, and it's very similar to like the political spectrum of like people were too liberal and now we are way too conservative, and like it's pulling back and forth and stuff. It's the same thing with the way that people think about technology, that you don't need to be default skeptical any more than you need to be default optimistic. Like I always think about the way that we frame things at Contrary Research as trying to be like very optimistically analytical. Like we're going in with a positive lens of like, let's see what this is about. But we're first and foremost trying to analyze and understand and unpack, rather than we're going in, you know, dutifully optimistic to just say, how are we going to spin this or whatever. And I feel like that balance is like really difficult and fairly rare, especially because, to your point, like a lot of the business models are incentivized around either like one end of the spectrum of like being really angry and writing hit pieces and stuff like that on companies, and one is like being an investor, right? So like if your business model is, I want to be optimistic because I want people to let me invest in their companies, therefore I can never be critical of those companies because why would they let me invest in those companies? Like I think that has created a really like dangerous dynamic. So you end up feeling like you're getting segmented into one or the other sort of, you know, end of the spectrum. Like, do you think that we're in a healthy place in terms of people's ability to articulate nuance? Because even like you said, like some of your lowest engagement pieces are often some of the most nuanced topics. So even though, yes, like tech is an audience of people who are generally fairly smart and thoughtful, it feels like we also struggle to swallow nuance.
To talk my own bag here a little
Please.
bit.
That's what we do here.
I think that's why I'm excited about the leverage and the sector that I cover specifically, is because a more nuanced understanding of the world and of what I write about allows you to make more money, right? You better understand these regulatory environments. You can trade NVIDIA. You better understand like what it means to be a cultural lodestone as a social media or a consumer application, and like what that responsibility entails. The better you'll be able to grow, the more sustainable business you'll be able to make. You can take these bets. And I don't envy anyone who doesn't cover a sector full of rich people and like who are trying to actively deploy capital. Like that's the saving grace for what I do. Like I couldn't imagine trying to be a music journalist and do what I do. Like good luck.
Yeah, Starving Artist Monthly is not the most profitable model. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I do know those people, and it's very hard. They make very little, but they do it because they care. And I feel that, you know, with what I do, to be clear, I don't look down on any of those three buckets of the tech crunches, of the optimists, of the trade publications. I think all those serve a really important role. But like I said, the leverage exists because I desperately want it to exist. I want people who care deeply about technology, who believe in it, but who are also analytically rigorous and honest. And I've been very fortunate. My launch sponsor is Mercury. You know, they're helping me, like they're helping getting off the ground. My subscribers have the proud paid subscribers of the leverage before there was even anything to read. I appreciate them, and they make it possible for me to do this. I just work a lot, and so that's how I'm able to do these things. So I don't want it to come across as like I view myself as some better person than anyone in any of these three buckets. But I think because the monetization and the reader preferences structure them out that way, there's this narrow way to build a different type of publication that I've just wanted to have for a long time, and that's what I'm going to do.
Final question for you as we wrap up here. So, like, dream the dream with me on the leverage, because if we've talked about the sort of past and the present of the state of startup media. Walk me through what the future looks like. Like, if you fast forward 5 years, what does the leverage look like? Obviously, you can go that same kind of bifurcation that we talked about, where it's like, hey, do you maintain low operating costs and try and have this sort of artisanal approach to technology and business analysis? Or do you launch a venture fund? Do you build out products? Do you add more almost like reporters and build out a beat or whatever? Like, what is the dream for the leverage?
One is pay off the credit card debt that I'm incurring by building this business.
Well, we got to walk before you run. That's fair.
Yeah, that's the year one KPI, no credit card debt. I can tell you the soft KPI that I have circled. It's anyone will answer my email. There's a lot of people I'd like to talk to in the world who don't respond to my cold emails. I'd like that to change. And so that's the way I think about what I do, is if I achieve a sufficient scale and impact, then I'll more than be able to pay for my bills. And after that, I think I'm most interested in helping people in these positions of power make good choices from both a business sense and like a consumer sense as well. I think it honestly looks a lot like it does right now, though I'm sure by the fall of this year, there will be a video component because I have to grow the top of funnel, and that's what is currently performative. I really think it looks pretty similar to now, honestly. Maybe I have an office. I'm not in my bedroom because my baby's nursery took over my office. But I think it's small goals. Like, I just want to make honest, creative work in a way that pays my bills. And that lack of grand ambition, I think, actually serves to benefit the end product. I don't have I just want to publish great things that I feel inspired by and just do that all the time. And that's a good enough mission for me.
Yeah, I love that. Well, that feels very artisanal to me, not to anchor you to a specific goal or business model or whatever, but it reminds me of, I think Dorkesh had a tweet a couple days ago where he talked about like the real value of the compounding engine that he's building with his podcast is not that like the better the guest, the more, the bigger the audience he gets or whatever. It's that as he gets to talk to smarter and smarter people, it compounds into other smart people who want to talk to him. He gets better, he learns and grows and improves. And so I think that like personal compounding effect goes hand in hand with what feels like a very personal mission for what you're building, which I like.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I just want to read great books, tell people about them, meet great people, tell them what they say, and help people navigate. We're entering the most tumultuous time in history. Like, I really genuinely believe that, between large language models, quantum, biotechnology, things that I know we don't talk about, the other stuff as much as LLMs anymore, but it really matters, and we're right on the cusp.
And then layer that in with like massive geopolitical risk and conflict and like the changing world order. And I think that would have been a hot take 5 years ago. Increasingly, it's become a more and more mainstream take. I don't know if it's yet hit full mainstream, but definitely it's tumultuous.
And so I want people to come to the leverage to find a place of intellectual safety harbor, and like they know that it's not going to be bombastic, it's going to be entertaining and warm and creative and informative, and that's all I want. That big house, fast cars, all the good stuff. Forget my family, just
all the perks.
Lambos. I want Lambos. That's the point of the leverage. It's a Lambo arbitrage.
All the vibes
vehicle.
And now we've reached the vibes. Well, listen, I appreciate you walking me through it. I'm very excited for the first issue. I will link to the leverage, your socials, get to follow you and follow along in the journey. But thanks for taking the time to chat.
Yeah, of course. Good to see you.